Hello, this is Helen Thomas and the CDFM study group. Today I want to go over CDFM Module 4, Competency 3. Let me adjust my chair here. All right. So Competency 3 deals with resource management. And so on page 4.3.1, we're going to look at affordability. Affordability answers the question, can we afford, right? Can we afford the purchase, the acquisition? So this kind of ties into where I'm currently reviewing in Module 2 is talking about the defense acquisition system. So you look at affordability to determine, can we afford to make this investment? All right, page 432 talks about how you assess the affordability. So I just want to read since I got this highlighted here. For major defense acquisition programs and major automated information programs, that's your ACAT 1 and ACAT 1 Alpha, those systems, affordability assessments are required. We're at milestone B and C. So again, you need to know based on the acquisition process where these things occur. So affordability assessment occurs milestone B and C. It's a requirement. I also have, I pulled out of this paragraph, it says, the assessment typically should be conducted by resource analysts in the DoD component headquarters or supporting organization. So affordability assessment conducted at milestone B and C, and it's done by the resource manager. And it should make sense, right? If you're in the business of managing money and processing money, then you should be the one determining if we can afford to make that purchase. Okay. I don't have nothing else highlighted there. And then let's go to page 436. 4.3.6 talks about full funding in the resource management arena. So either full funding or versus incremental funding. But when you're talking about the acquisition system and you're talking about procurement and MilCon, you do not those are not incremental funding. Those are full funding authority. All right, I just wanted to make sure I say that. So on the bottom of page 436, when it talks about full funding is assessed by the milestone decision authority at each decision point. So that means at milestone A, B, C, and full funding, because remember, when we're talking about full rate of production, we have another decision point there. So a full funding is assessed. We're still at each stage, you're always doing assessment. So just like the affordability assessment is done at milestone B and C, now it's saying that full funding is assessed throughout the whole process. So that means all your phases in milestone A, B, and C. Page 4.3.7, where it talks about cost as an independent variable. Remember, it's easy to then differentiate and select the best choice based on cost at the end of the day, but you also have to consider sustainability, affordability, all those other criteria. As long as all those criteria are met for all your courses of action, and then you end up selecting based on cost, then there's no issue. So the concept of cost as an independent variable means that cost is easier to reduce the cost when early on in the acquisition process. Now I'm going to read what it says verbatim. Cost in this context refers to life cycle costs, which should be treated as equally important to performance and schedule in program decision. The life cycle from cradle to grave, from the time of conception to when you dispose of the items, is what it's saying. You got to look at the total cost. So that's what life cycle cost is. So cost as an independent variable, meaning if I look at the total cost at each stage and the final cost, it's easier for me to make my cost cuts where it's necessary because I know how much the program is estimated to cost me. So it tells you how to do that as cost of independent variable on page 7, and I'm not going to go over that. So the summary is on page 438. So that's affordability. Now on page 439, it goes into the acquisition system cost from cradle to grave, life cycle cost composition, and total ownership cost. So intergovernment, who owns what piece, how much does it cost, cradle to grave. Also includes overhead, your admin costs, your personnel, your travel, all of that is included in your life cycle cost. This is amazing. I'm going to pause here because this on page 4310, I just went over this in module 2 in my study group, my live session. So it's like, oh, here it is again. So life cycle cost composition. So now this diagram measures the performance of each different stages of the acquisition process. So life cycle cost is how the cost is broken down in categories. And depending on the cost or the type of cost will determine the type of appropriation that is used. So since this is fresh in my mind, let's see if I got it. So if the first one, so life cycle cost is everything together. So if you get a list of RDT&E, Milcon, O&M, and procurement, etc., and they say, what's the life cycle cost of this program? All you have to do is add up all of the categories, the dollar amounts. However, let's look at the diagram on page 4310. Block number 2 says development cost. So yes, you're going to need to know if they say, what is the development cost of making the purchase to do XYZ? The development cost only includes your RDT&E, research, development, technology, and equipment dollars. So if you get a list of all the appropriations, everything that have RDT&E tied to it is considered to be your development cost. So think of it as I'm early on in the acquisition process, and so I'm developing the item. Development cost, so that means I need to do research and development. Look at my technology, my equipment. What do I have in my inventory? So development cost is first, RDT&E. Number 2 is your flyaway cost. So now I've done my development, I'm ready to fly away. I'm ready to take off. So my flyaway cost includes procurement of the prime item. That means I'm using procurement dollars to buy the primary item, the end item, the primary item. Not all the support, not the spares, not the parts, the main item. So that is procurement of the prime item. That's my flyaway cost. I'm ready to take off. Weapon system cost now includes the flyaway cost and procurement of my support item. So procurement of my prime and the support items together make up my weapon system cost. Weapon system, procurement of the prime item, procurement of the support items. Number 3, weapon system cost. So if they say calculate the weapon system cost out of all these numbers, you're going to have to know, pull out where it says procurement of the prime item, procurement of the support item. You add those 2 numbers up, that is my weapon systems cost. Number 4, procurement cost. Procurement cost is everything that says the word procurement on it. So anything, prime items, support items, and my initial spares added on to it. All those categories added together make up my procurement cost. So that's easy because procurement, using procurement dollars, should easy to calculate. So started with, okay, so I'm trying to do it without look. Development costs, RDT&E. Flyaway, I developed, now I need to fly away. So flyaway cost is procurement of the initial item, prime item. Let me use prime item. Weapon system cost is prime plus the support. Procurement cost, prime, support, and spares, initial spares, all together make up my procurement cost. The next cost, number 5, is program acquisition cost. If you notice, the square is around number 1, 2. Wait, did I do that? I think I said that a little backwards because my number 1 was flyaway. Okay, yeah. Let me rewind. Let me redo this because I like doing stuff in order because it's easier to remember. Number 1 was the flyaway cost. So I'm taking off. Flyaway is procurement of the prime item. Number 2 is development cost. Now we're back on track. So development is RDT&E. Number 3 is weapon system cost. Weapon system cost is my procurement of the prime and the support items make up weapon system cost. Number 4, procurement cost makes up procurement of the prime, procurement of the support, and procurement of the initial spares. All together is the procurement cost. Number 5 is the program acquisition cost. Your program acquisition cost includes flyaway costs, development costs, procurement costs, and MILCON on your facilities. Your MILCON make up all of that, make up your program acquisition cost. So that just simply means if they say calculate the program acquisition cost, then you know I need to pull out RDT&E, procurement, and MILCON. Anything that uses those dollars in that process is your procurement cost. Operations and supports. They use O&M dollars and MILPERS. And also in your disposal, they use O&M. So you can add that too, because remember, it's cradle to grave. The cradle is your flyaway cost. Your disposal is your grave. When not your grave, but you know what I mean. Is when you actually, how you're supposed to dispose of the item. All those 6 items together make up the life cycle cost composition of an item. So if they're purchasing an aircraft, they're purchasing a vehicle, you're purchasing an automation system. If it starts from the flyaway, it ends with the disposal. But remember, flyaway development, weapon system, procurement cost, program acquisition costs, operation and support, disposal. And if you just keep going over that until it becomes second nature to you. So the life cycle cost, program and phases is listed at the bottom of 10 and 11. And then they go over, they kind of show you, the chart below depicts a national profile of annual expenditures, or how much it costs to do RDT&E. Investment cost is your procurement, operations and support is your O&M and MILPERS, and disposal is often your O&M. It gives the definition at the bottom of page 11 and 12 for each one of the phases, so make sure you look over that. In my notes, since it's a study group, I just go over some highlights that I made just for you to kind of focus in on those particular areas. The bottom of page 12, 4.3.12 talks about the implications of the evolutionary acquisition. So evolutionary acquisition means that don't think that they're always starting from ground zero. They're not always starting from scratch whenever we're developing a new product or item. So evolutionary can simply means that something's already out there, so we're going to evolve and change, adapt, use what's already there, tap into it, and just add on to what needs to be added on. So let's see what it says, because I got the whole paragraph highlighted. Implications of evolutionary acquisition. The application of life cycle cost categories to program phase may need to be modified, so you can modify the applications of program for evolutionary acquisition. Go down a little bit. Acquisition. Evolutionary acquisition strategy: define, develop, produce, and deploy an initial military. Because all of this is dependent on how much time. If I need the aircraft by next year, I'm not going to start from scratch from the specs and what it needs. I need to tap into something that's already there, and then I need to build on that capability that's already out there. So the evolutionary process does not always require us to go to research and development, which is what it's saying on page 13. It can jump simply to the operations and support if you already have an item and it doesn't take that much to change it, or the investment. So for a program with evolutionary acquisition, the question often arises concerning the scope of the life cycle cost estimate presented at the milestone review. In the case of incremental development, the entire acquisition program is included in the scope of the program. Normally, the life cycle cost estimate should attempt to reflect in the cost analysis requirements description. And we just covered this today too. So the CARD is prepared by the program manager, and it's a requirement by the Director of Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation. The DK requires the CARD. So that's, just think cost analysis. So everything is tied into the money. Can we afford it? So total ownership costs at the bottom of page 13, 4313. In general, traditional life cycle cost estimates are in most cases adequate in scope to support decision involving system design, such as weight, material mix, reliability. All right, a lot of good information for y'all to read through. Total ownership. All right, so competency 3, section 3, 4315 now looks at analysis of the alternative. So in the material solution analysis, when you first begin this process, so remember what's driving the acquisition process is when we use the JCIDS, Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System, who is chaired by the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, and he has the Joint Requirements Oversight Council, is once we received the National Security Strategy, they analyze the strategy to come up with the National Defense Strategy. Once we have the National Defense Strategy, they use JCIDS, Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System, to identify capabilities we have to meet the strategy and the capabilities that we are missing that we need to meet the strategy. So they identify capability gaps. So within that process, the JROC then annotates that on an initial capabilities document. They want to say, there's a capability, don't just give me the problem, give me some solution. So once the JCIDS identify their capability gap, then they also give you a solution. The analysis done by JCIDS process is using the .MLPF process. They look at doctrine, organization, training, material, leader development. So they look at all of those areas. Okay, where do we need to make the changes at? If it is not a material solution, you go to the PPBE process. If they determine that the solution requires a material solution, that's like an equipment, material solution, then that is what triggers this process, the defense acquisition process. So within the defense acquisition process, you have to war game. You have to analyze alternatives. So let's go back to page 4315 in the module 4, analysis of the alternatives. So page 16 at the top, the first paragraph under the introduction, where my little highlights at. For ACAT 1, so remember, any program that's ACAT 1 for General Major Acquisition Program, or ACAT 1 Alpha for automation programs, that's what I'm saying here, or above, an analysis of the alternative is required at major milestone decision points. And at the full rate production decision. Remember, that's another decision point, full rate. So the AOAs are an important element of the defense acquisition process. For ACAT 1, that means these are DoD level programs if they're acquisition category 1 Delta, or 1AM, they're DoD level programs. So this is saying that all DoD level programs that are ACAT 1, they require you do an analysis of the alternatives. And you might say, well, when is it done in this whole phase? The analysis of the alternative is often done in the beginning and is saying throughout the process, but the first one is done in the material solution analysis. All right. And then it gives you the purpose of the AOA. In that same paragraph on page 16, it says the purpose of the analysis of the alternative is to assess the potential material solution. All that is now we know the capability gap requires a material solution. Is now we come up with courses of action. We come up with alternatives. We can do this, we can do that. So they're courses of action. And then we analyze those courses of action. So that is all that analysis of the alternative is. Assess, analyze the potential material solution to satisfy that capability needs that was approved in the initial capabilities document. Remember, when JROC identified the capability gap, they then wrote it down in the initial capabilities document to let everyone know this is the document that says what the capability gap is and what it will take to fill that gap. So role of the analysis as part of the material solution analysis at the bottom of page 16. So it also says where you do that AOA. AOA is done in the initial part of the process in the material solution analysis. And we receive AOA guidance from the Director of Cost Assessment, the DCAPE. So if you go to page 17, that first paragraph, it says it there. The Director of Cost Assessment and Program and Evaluation develops and approves the guidance for the AOA. This guidance is developed with the input, of course, they don't write it all by themselves. The next sentence, following a successful milestone decision or development decision review, the Milestone Decision Authority, MDA, directs initiation of the AOA in the acquisition decision memorandum. So when you're going through the acquisition process, every stage, every decision point is made, the acquisition decision memorandum, the ADM, did I say that correctly? Yeah, acquisition decision memorandum is updated. So that's where you see ADM. MDA's Milestone Decision Authority, that means the senior acquisition individual. And at the DoD level, the senior acquisition individual is the Undersecretary of Defense, Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics, the USD AT&L. So he's the MDA. Remember, in the acquisition process, before you move to any stage, to any process, there's always a decision review to determine, okay, continue. So, because everything costs money and time. Time is also an effective commodity, an efficient commodity. So we need to make sure that before you move and do anything else in the process, that you do an assessment and a decision review. All right, page 17, page 18. Moving along, continuing with the analysis of the alternative. So there are 8 elements. So make sure you review the 8 elements starting on the bottom of page 18, the top of page 19. Let's see what I highlight. The first major step leading to a successful AOA is the creation and coordination of a well-considered plan. Of course, with anything. The plan should establish a roadmap of how the analysis will proceed. So let me just read through just the major areas. The 8 elements: introduction, ground rules, alternatives, determination of effective measures, effectiveness analysis, how are we going to analyze them, how are we going to do the actual cost analysis, cost effectiveness comparison, What criteria are we going to use? Organization and management. Then we come up with our final solution. So those are the 8 elements of the analysis of the alternative. All right, so I have nothing there. More on the airway summary. All right, let's go to page 4323, cost analysis. So all part of the acquisition process. So immediately I have, under the introduction, independent cost estimates are done by the DK. Remember, cost analysis always associate with the DK. I throw that out because when we did the module 2 today, we looked at the 3 cost estimates. The program office estimate is done at the program manager level. The component cost estimate is done at the component level. And then you have the independent cost estimate, which is mentioned here on the bottom of page 4323, which is done by the DK for all your acquisition 1 programs. Okay. Moving over to page 4325, talks about the approach and the scope. The second paragraph starts with, for programs that will be reviewed by the Office of the Secretary of Defense, Office of Cost Assessment, the program office is required to define the program in a CARD, cost, and we think we mentioned that earlier too, cost analysis requirement description document. So think about it. In the beginning of the process, you need an acquisition program baseline. I need to know where I'm starting. Then I need to do cost analysis CARD, the CARD, C-A-R-D, cost analysis requirements description. What type of criteria are we using to do the cost comparison between the various courses of action? So the CARD is required, and it is a requirement from the DK. Part of the system description typically includes the work breakdown structure, the WBS, like you probably heard the term WBS, work breakdown structure. So based on the WBS, the work breakdown structure, how much it's going to cost for each stage of acquisition process. The next part of this is looking at, let's see, the different cost estimates. Because remember, you got to come up with estimates before you even start the process. So page 27, let's look at the diagram on 27 first before we move forward. You have parametric, analogy, actual cost, and engineering. And then it shows you in the process where it is with milestone A, milestone B, and C. So in milestone A, you may use the analogy and the parametric, and we're going to go over those on the next phase. And then in milestone C, it's saying production and deployment, looking at actual cost versus engineering cost. So let's turn over to page 4328. So the first one is parametric, and how you need to know the differences between each. First of all, am I comparing similar items, different items? Maybe I don't have none in the inventory, so that's the first one I'm developing, so I'm starting from scratch. Am I using historical data? So let's see, parametric, metric sounds like statistic to me. So it says statistical method to develop cost estimates. Okay, what does it say? It is used to estimate a given cost using an established relationship with one or more independent variables. The relationship may be mathematically simple. So parametric meaning I'm taking several costs, maybe it's pieces of the puzzle, putting it together to come up with the actual cost estimate to begin the process. So I have several other systems pulling all those costs together. Analogy, the difference is, says I have a similar item. Analogy is a technique that is used based on historical design of a similar item. In this technique, a currently fielded system, similar in design, is used to come up with the base number, your starting point. So analogy sound like history, sound like past. So I'm using one similar system in the past, historical system, and how much it costs to get my cost estimate. Engineering, meaning now I can actually get the detailed cost. With this technique, the system becomes costly. Its cost is broken down into lower level components. Think of an engineer, they're real detailed. So the engineering estimate is I'm using specific, okay, how many man hours to do this and how much it costs this and so forth. So engineering is broken down into lower level components. Engineering estimates for direct labor costs may be based on analysis of engineering drawings and so forth. Now, under the engineering, is commonly called the bottom-up approach, the bottom-up estimate. So it says, the engineering estimate requires extensive knowledge of the system and lots of detailed data. Actual costs mean I have the same exact system already out there, so I can use the actual cost, and maybe in my acquisition process, changing or tweaking a few things, but I have a system that's already out there, so I can get the actual cost to develop. So early on, analogy, if I'm just estimating based on something that was already done, analogy. Parametric, I have several components of things that I'm pulling together to get the cost. We have actual costs, engineering costs. I'm getting the detailed cost for each step in the process. And then again, actual costs. So estimated costs. My next highlights on page 4330. I said to look at the risk analysis because every decision that we make, there's an associated risk. I think, yeah, I'm gonna finish because I don't like my videos to be too long. Then it draws out. So at the end of this section, I'm gonna do another video to finish off competency 3. So it said quantitative risk analysis can provide a broad overall assessment of variability in the cost. Reading down, risk analysis assesses the aggregate variability in overall estimate due to the variability. Okay, yeah. It is then possible to derive and estimate empirical probable distribution for the overall life cycle cost estimate. This allows the analyst to design the nature. So all this is saying is you got to do a risk assessment, identify the risk because there's going to be a cost if you don't. And remember, total cost, life cycle cost, you do your risk analysis so you can mitigate those risks so that they won't affect your process, your program, and then end up costing you more money than estimated. So that's 30. All right, page 4331. The Office of the Secretary of Defense, Office of Cost Assessment, says 10 U.S. Code 2434 requires an independent life cycle cost be prepared and provided to the milestone decision authority. So that's the law that says you must do a cost analysis. We don't want you to just go out there, make decision, purchase things, and then, oh, we don't need it anymore. Now we just wasted the taxpayers' dollars. So it's that law, 10 U.S. Code, section 2434, fiscal law, says they're required to do a cost analysis. What else it says? The specific responsibility for fulfilling the requirements for such an independent cost estimate is assigned to the Office of the Secretary of Defense, Office of Cost Assessment. Okay, so it says for acquisition category 1 Delta program, 1 Charlie, when requested. All right, so a lot of good information in there. I'm not going to read all of it, but making sure that you understand. So the Office of Cost Assessment also has other general responsibilities. So I'm reading again, page 4331. All right, so nothing major there. The card again is mentioned on page 4332. Remember that cost analysis, to come up with the requirements description. It's mentioned on the bottom of page 32. It gives you the timeline. Remember, the first card must be submitted 180 days before the first OIPT and 45 days before it actually begins. The draft is 180 and then the actual is 45 days. And it goes even further to say 21 days before the OIPT, the cost assessment review meeting. You go over the card. 10 days, 3 days, so you can review that. The card is used to describe formally the acquisition program for purpose of preparing both the program office and the Office of Cost Assessment. We want to know how much it's going to cost while the program manager is doing the development. All right, so that's all I have. From this section is primarily looking at the different cost estimating methods and the law that says we have to do cost analysis for your major program. All right, so I'm going to end this video here and remind you, please subscribe so that you can get the updates as I upload the new videos for CDFM Module 4. And I'm continuing with Competency 3, which is your resource management section, in another video. So thank you for stopping by, and I'll see you guys again next time.